This is Zobal, and this is my updated Guardian build guide for the specialization patch. You can only take 3 trait lines now, and the stat points that you got from the trait lines no longer apply. Instead, gear got buffed 30%. This is a pretty nice change for Guardian because we missed out on a lot of ferocity because the Devour line is bad. Guardian got a pretty big buff overall on damage. Part of that is because of burning damage got buffed. It also stacks in intensity instead of duration, so you're no longer sharing uptimes with others. You should still be building towards direct damage though. Some noteworthy Guardian specific changes would be that virtues got reduced in cooldown by a bit. This is because you no longer get stat points from trait lines anymore. Skills that applied burning got buffed in duration or stack of burning. Our tomes were changed. Tome of Courage is now a signet which heals everybody around you while you're in combat. The active is a full heal for everybody around you, just like skill 5 used to be. Tome of Courage is now a shout. It gives everybody around you 5 seconds of haste and 10 seconds of fury. It's 30-second recharge, which makes it really good and more worth using than Renewed Focus if you don't need the blocks. We also got 2 traits by default. We got Spirit Weapon Duration Increase, which will be nice when you need to do Wall Shield Wall for projectile defense. We also got Consecrated Ground, which will take some time to get used to. No more cheesing to get double walls either. So this is the DPS of the builds that we ran before the specializations. Guardian was more on the lower end of DPS compared to all the other classes. You can see that we got quite a big buff that'll make us more competitive with other classes DPS. Radiant Fire makes Torch really good and worth using over Focus. Symbolic Avenger got changed from 20 to 10, which makes Honor and Hammer not quite as good. Greatsword is still going to be the best thing to run in general. Zeal Radiance Virtues is definitely the best build. With a reasonable amount of unscathed uptime, you can match Honor, and it also gives you the ability to have more support if needed. You could also potentially greatly out damage the Honor line. Scepter is still going to be the best thing for large hitbox bosses that don't move much, and you can see Hammer still falls short like before. Along with the DPS calc numbers, the keys also is nice enough to make me this graph of DPS over time given the different setups. You can really see how well each setup performs against trash and bosses with this. So the Greatsword build is still the best thing to run in general. You'll use a mace instead of sword. You'll use a torch instead of a focus. Focus is still good against bosses where you'll need block rotations like Mossman on Archiviner. For rotations you want to start out with a focus 5 and then immediately swap out your focus for a torch. And then you'll do Mace Symbol, Torch 4, and then Torch 4 again that procs from Radiant Fire. Don't swap until you've done that, and then swap the Greatsword and do the typical bursting rotation. Hopefully you'll get a proc during your Rolling Wrath of Radiant Fire. Use that immediately after you swap, and then do the typical Mace rotation. After you do the symbol though, you don't want to swap, but you want to wait for another Torch 4 again, because you'll get that as well as a proc from Radiant Fire, and then you want to swap back to Greatsword and repeat the rotation. Greatsword build that you want to run is Zeal, Radiance, and Virtues. For Zeal you want to run Fiery Wrath that got nerfed from 10 to 7. Zealous Blade got 200 Mastery added in. This will take less time to get the second Rolling Wrath in, which will lead to more damage. And the new Symbolic Avenger trait, deal more damage to enemies standing in your symbols. It was originally supposed to be 20%, but it's only 10% now. That means that Virtues is going to be better than Honor to take. For Radiance you want Right-Handed Strength. Sword skills recharge faster now, that got added in, but sword is not worth using over mace now. The sword skills are not DPS gains over autos. You're going to be losing powerful blades. You're going to be getting Symbolic Power and Symbolic Avenger. Mace was only about 2% worse before, now it's a lot better. You want to take Radiant Fire, you gain Zealot's Flame when you critically hit an enemy now, every 10 seconds. This means if you're not on a torch, you'll still get Zealot's Flame, but if you are on a torch, you'll also get to use Zealot's Fire. This makes Focus not as good as Torch since you'll be getting lots of Zealot's Fires off. That'll add quite a bit of damage. Burning is actually meaningful now, and you won't have to share uptime with people, so Amplified Wrath will be good. Fortunately, you lose blind exposure, which you'll be doing less vuln. For Virtues, you want to run Unscathed Contender as much as possible. Only use Master Consecrations if you really need it, since your damage will go down quite a bit. You want to run Supreme Justice since burning is relevant. You trigger the passive effect of Virtue of Justice every 3 attacks instead of 5. You want to run Absolute Resolution if you really need it. You should be able to get away with just Purging Flames, though. And if you're in a group, Battle Presence would be the best choice. It will help people keep up their Scholar buff. If you're soloing, I would use Permeating Wrath. It's less likely that you're going to group up mobs solo, so that would be nice. And use Indomitable Courage whenever you really need a lot of stability. There's quite a bit of events where that is the case. When you fight a large hitbox boss like Lupicus, you should swap the Scepter build. The rotation starts out the same as before. You use Smite, then Focus Skills, then Torch. The only thing that changes is that you don't want to swap back to Focus at all unless you really need that block, and you'll just be spamming Radiant Fire procs from Torch 4 now, along with Torch 4 and Smite. Scepter build you want to run is Zeal, Radiance, and Virtues. It's nearly identical to the Greatsword build. You want to use Fiery Wrath when you're in groups that stack Might. If you're in a group that barely stacks any Might or you're soloing, use Zealous Scepter instead. Kindled Zeal. Grandmaster Zeal trait is underwhelming. I would just use Shattered Aegis. This could be okay if you're running Shielded Avenger. Radiance, you want Right-Handed Strength. Radiant Fire, given the way this works, you want to use your focus skills like you did before off the start. But now you'll just want to camp Scepter Torch after that, unless you really need to block from focus and you think it's actually going to be up. Amplified Wrath. Unscathed Contender from Virtues. Master Consecrations if you really need it instead. Supreme Justice. This is really great with Scepter because you get so many hits from Smite. And if you really need Might and you're not in a group that stacks Might because you're soloing or you're tugging, these two traits really work well together. You'll get lots of Might, lots of burns, lots of damage. And again, these traits change. This one for group, this one for solo, and this one if you need it. You should only really use hammer builds if you really feel the need to. They add extra survival at the cost of DPS. They're good for CC for some events as well. Pretty much follow the same thing as I went over with the Greatsword build. You'll use a Mace Torch as a secondary. Use Focus if you need block rotations. It's the same rotation to start out with. Use Focus 5 and then swap to your Mace and do Torch skills until you proc Radiant Fire. Then you do the regular hammer chains, and then you do the new Mace rotation, and then back to hammer chains. This is the build that you'll want to run for hammer if you don't need much or any support. It's comparable to Greatsword if you don't have to dodge at all, and you'll be losing the support from Virtues and getting Prot instead. So if that's your thing, then go ahead. Fiery Wrath, you want to take that. Kindled Zeal and Symbolic Avenger for Zeal. Radiance, you want Right-Handed Strength, Radiant Fire, Amplified Wrath. For Honor, all the choices aren't very good. I would just go with Invigorated Bulwark. The recharge reduction isn't going to matter since the rotation is not going to give you a third symbol of faith, which is the big DPS gain of Mace. And you want to run Empowering Might and Writ of Persistence. If you do need support, you want to run this hammer build. Zeal, Radiance, and Virtues. You lose quite a bit of damage, but that's pretty much the problem with hammer if you need support. Zeal and Radiance are going to be the same. The only thing that's going to change is you'll have Virtues now instead of Honor, and you'll be running the same thing as the Greatsword and Scepter builds. Unscathed Contender, Master Consecrations if need be, Supreme Justice, Absolute Resolution if need be. Glacial Heart got the slow taken out of it, which was the selling point of having that trait, so it's pretty worthless now. Battle Presence for groups, Pervading Wrath for soloing, Indomitable Courage when need be. For gear, you'll still want Berserker gear, Scholar Runes, Power Infusions. You're getting more chance to crit with Radiance now, so Assassins and stuff like that's not going to help. If you really want some tankier gear, you can get Celestial, Knights, Soldiers. I would only suggest getting 3 pieces since we now get stat boosts on our gear instead of traits. So you can get Flame Legion runes over Scholar if you're really looking for a budget choice, or you're not keeping Scholar up much. Compared to Scholar with full uptime, it's about 5% worse. Used to be about 7 before this patch. And for weapons, you'll want everything but Sword since it's not good anymore, and Shield was always bad. Sigils, I would go with Knight and Force if you're only going to have one set. That's by far the best. Daytime content, I would do Force Air. If you don't want to deal with air, you can get Accuracy for 2-handed weapons. One-handed weapons get Sigil of Smoldering. These are not going to be as good as air. Trash is going to die really fast, and you want extra damage for bosses. Consumables, seaweed salad is the best food. It takes a lot of effort to maximize your damage with it though. So I would just stick with it for record runs or if you're doing some kind of crazy speed kill. Otherwise I would use sweet and spicy butternut squash soup. It is the best for Greatsword builds. For hammer and scepter builds, bowls of sweet and spicy beans pull ahead by a little bit, but it means you have to have a long fight for it to be better. So I would just stick with this food in general. Dragon Breath buns can be good for some things. If you're just doing casual runs, Birthday Blaster is a good idea. By the time you're finished the path, you'll probably have a little bit of time left on your food anyway. Slaying potions are the best thing. If you can't use slaying potions, use toxic sharpening stones. Personal Merchant Express is amazing for trolling. The best place to put it is SE Path 1. Put it in the middle of the teleporter while everybody is picking a path and not paying attention. I'm not even going to go over that one. You want to run the same utilities except for the elite. You want to run Feel My Wrath instead. Instead of Renewed Focus, unless you really need the blocks. 5 seconds of quickness on 30-second recharge instantly. It's really an amazing skill. You can use it most fights. Sinking of Courage could be good for some niche things. You now have Consecrated Grounds, which is pretty useful for some things. It'll take some time to get used to. Thanks again for watching, and thanks to the keys for doing all the DPS calcs. Hope that all helped you out, gave you some good information. And until Dragon Hunter, I guess I'll see you next time.
Go ahead, hit me. Refreshing. Refreshing. Armored up.